Panic and confusion continues to grip the nation as all Americans are left asking one fearful question. Which celebrity will President Trump murder next to distract us from his name being in the Epstein files? Here with the latest on this still developing story is our chief political correspondent. What's the latest? Has the president's body count increased since we spoke in the previous hour?
Not as of a few seconds ago, but I will be checking my phone throughout this segment just in case. We seem to still be in a state of fragile equilibrium that has held since the death of former professional wrestler Hulk Hogan on Thursday, where President Trump is clearly still agitated about the amount of attention being paid to his presence in the Epstein files, but not so much that he has felt it necessary to take the life of another famous actor, musician, or athlete in an attempt to force us to talk about something else.
For the benefit of any of our viewers who may not have been following this story as it has unfolded these past few weeks, perhaps because they've been binging Downton Abbey yet again, or they've just returned from a completely above-board trip to Thailand with friends, why don't you summarize President Trump's recent reign of terror? Whose lives has he taken thus far, and why?
Well, opinions vary as to exactly when this current period of President Trump visiting his mighty wrath upon the people of the nation began, but general consensus seems to date it to approximately a week and a half ago, when it was revealed that the Wall Street Journal was preparing to publish a story that would link President Trump with Jeffrey Epstein, the financier and convicted sex trafficker who died in jail in 2019. President Trump called the story fake and threatened to sue the Wall Street Journal if it published the story. The Journal published the story anyway, and so later that day, Trump retaliated by having CBS cancel Stephen Colbert's late-night show.
That's an important detail. Many have assumed that the cancellation of Colbert was an act of capitulation on the part of Paramount following the settlement of Trump's lawsuit against them.
A reasonable assumption, but no, The Late Show was the first casualty of the president's ongoing killing spree. And if you ask me, Colbert is lucky it was only his show that got axed, and he should watch his mouth from now on.
Can't argue with that. What about the first celebrities the president actually killed? Remind us of the circumstances of that.
The publication of the Wall Street Journal story, which included details of a somewhat lewd birthday card allegedly sent to Epstein by President Trump, only served to increase interest in the Epstein files and President Trump's possible, some, definitely not me, might say probable involvement in some of Epstein's heinous misdeeds. When the sacrifice of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert failed to convince journalists, politicians, and the general public to drop the subject of the Epstein files, Trump responded by killing Malcolm Jamal Warner.
Most famous for playing Theo on The Cosby Show.
Correct. The sudden death of the beloved sitcom star was also insufficient to distract people from the Epstein story for more than a few hours, so President Trump escalated his efforts by ending the life of legendary rock star Ozzy Osbourne.
A mere 17 days after Osbourne's record-breaking final concert performance.
That's right, Ozzy Osbourne's Back to the Beginning concert featured an all-star lineup leading to final sets by Osbourne himself and then Osbourne with the rest of Black Sabbath, sold 45,000 tickets and raised £140 million for charity, and 2.5 weeks later, because people are still talking about the Epstein files, Ozzy Osbourne was dead.
Are you certain that Malcolm Jamal Warner and Ozzy Osbourne represented the beginning of Trump's killing spree? Connie Francis, the pop star who gained fame in the 1950s and 60s, died the day before the Wall Street Journal story on the birthday card Trump allegedly sent to Epstein was published. Could those two events be connected? Is there evidence President Trump killed Connie Francis as a kind of warning to the Wall Street Journal?
That's an understandable conclusion to draw, but so far as I've been able to discover, the timing of the death of Connie Francis was entirely coincidental and had nothing to do with President Trump and the Epstein files story. However, it's possible the death of Connie Francis is what inspired President Trump to begin murdering a truly staggering number of celebrities in an attempt to divert the world's attention from the possibility that he is guilty of what most people consider to be one of the few truly unpardonable crimes.
The death of Ozzy Osbourne certainly inspired an outpouring of appreciation for Osbourne's music, but it failed to quell the interest in the Epstein story. And yet it was at this point that the president altered his strategy and turned to nonviolent methods, was it not?
Yes, when the deaths of Malcolm Jamal Warner and Ozzy Osbourne did not permanently disrupt the fascination with the president's long and close personal history with a known pedophile, however innocuous that history may be, President Trump reverted to some of the less severe tactics familiar to those of us who have followed his political and indeed his entire public career. He unsealed hundreds of thousands of pages of FBI documents related to the surveillance of civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He made a series of seemingly random social media posts demanding that the Washington Commanders football team and the Cleveland Guardians baseball team revert to their previous names, which were changed due to long-standing concerns of cultural insensitivity toward Native Americans, and he publicly accused former President Barack Obama of treason.
Under federal law, someone convicted of treason could face the death penalty. Is this President Trump laying the groundwork to kill President Obama as well?
Probably, but even the spectacle of a sitting president indirectly calling for the execution of a former president was not enough to redirect the attention of the nation away from the Epstein files. So, President Trump was forced, much to his own regret no doubt, to once again snuff out the life of a widely admired celebrity, specifically jazz musician Chuck Mangione. Unfortunately, the threatening impact of Trump's killing of Mangione was diminished somewhat by the fact that the publicist Trump assigned to release the news of Mangione's death neglected to do so until 2 days after the fact.
That's quite a mistake. I assume that publicist has been fired?
That publicist is dead. Unfortunately, whether due to the botched publication of the death or the American people's limited interest in the passing of smooth jazz superstars turned voice actors, the Epstein files remained headline news. It was at that point that Trump committed what is, to date, his most recent celebrity killing when he became responsible for the death of Terry Bollea, better known as multi-time former professional wrestling world champion Hulk Hogan.
The death of Hulk Hogan at the hands of President Trump is a perplexing turn of events, is it not? After all, Hogan has been an outspoken ally of the president, even speaking at the Republican National Convention last year.
This is true. However, my sources at the White House tell me that while President Trump famously values loyalty, and Hogan was certainly loyal, Hogan's greatest value to Trump in this moment was as a subject of nostalgic memories, a figure whom many of Trump's supporters would have idolized during their youths in the 1980s. As characterized by my sources, by ending the life of Hogan, Trump is sending the message that no one shall be spared by the consuming fires of his rage, that even his allies are vulnerable to his deathly touch, and that unless his demands are met, he is willing and able to take away everyone and everything you have ever loved.
That's leadership we can depend on. Given the current rumors about President Trump considering a pardon for Epstein confidant and accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell in exchange for exonerating testimony, has there been any speculation regarding who might be next on the president's kill list, assuming the people of the United States do not heed his call to cease all discussion of matters related to Jeffrey Epstein and the president's alleged participation in unspeakably vile criminal acts on Epstein's private island?
Yes, and as you can imagine, such speculation is fairly wide-ranging given President Trump's all-bets-are-off approach to selecting his victims. Now that we know friend and foe are equally likely to fall before the president's sweeping scythe as he takes his harvest of retribution for our insolence, it's really anybody's guess who's next. Will the president choose to take another celebrity? If so, what kind? Athlete? Musician? Actor? Will it be someone who has been a critic of the president or another of his vocal supporters? Should Robert De Niro be worried, or would it be wise of Ted Nugent to make sure his affairs are in order? At this point, we have nothing but questions.
What about someone a bit more current, someone more popular with mainstream audiences at the moment? Pedro Pascal, for instance.
No, President Trump wouldn't dare harm Pedro Pascal.
What about Vice President J.D. Vance?
What about him?
Might the president kill him next?
Nobody would care.
One of Trump's own children, then, perhaps? To truly prove that he is willing to go to any lengths?
Unlikely. The only one of his children whom President Trump seems to consistently remember is his daughter Ivanka, and he would never kill her for obvious reasons.
Indeed. What can bring this blood-soaked orgy of death to a conclusion? How will President Trump's righteous killing hand be stayed, and what can people do to help bring that about?
Judging by what my sources within the administration tell me, the solution is very simple. Just stop talking about the Epstein files.
Stop talking about the Epstein files.
Yes, stop talking about the Epstein files, stop demanding the Epstein files be released, stop calling for investigations into what the Epstein files say about President Trump and what evil and unforgivable offenses President Trump may have committed during his intimate and enduring friendship with convicted assaulter of children Jeffrey Epstein. Just stop talking about the Epstein files altogether.
So stop talking about the Epstein files, stop talking about Trump's connection to Epstein, stop mentioning the name of Jeffrey Epstein even.
Exactly.
Sounds like a plan. We'll check back in with you next hour for the latest on this story. Coming up after the break, the effects of Paramount's merger with Skydance and the new company's pledge to eliminate all DEI are already becoming apparent. We'll have a preview of the new all-white version of Star Trek. Stay tuned for that.